Hi everybody, this is my presentation for EDL 854 case study. My name is Michaela Schick. So first off, a summary of the case. In part one of the case, Mrs. Bowman, who's a parent at George Washington Middle School, would like the PTA to fund her daughter's national cheerleading trip, which is about $700, but Mr. Stevens, who's the principal, believes that this is too much money for the PTA to be spending on one student. In the second part of the case, Mrs. Bowman is selling tickets at a basketball game as a parent volunteer, and she turns in money to Mr. Stevens that is $50 short of what she should have sold. She claims that this is because there were 10 ripped, tickets that could not be sold, so she didn't receive profits for those. But Mr. Stevens knows that there should be a $50 bill in the bag because he knows someone who paid with a $50 bill, and that $50 bill is missing. So the first category is the problem identification and analysis. First, what we know. We know the demographic information of George Washington Middle School. It's in a town where the population is declining a little bit. A lot of people are moving to wealthier areas, so the school has a low-income population, but there's still a ton of parent involvement, which is really awesome. Mr. Stevens is the principal, Mrs. Bowman is a parent volunteer, and she is selling tickets to the basketball game, and Mr. Dumas is a parent, and he paid for his basketball ticket with a $50 bill. What we need to know is what authority does Mr. Stevens have in the PTA? Is he in charge? Is he able to make decisions in the PTA? We also need to know what were the ticket sales procedures at this school. So were they following procedures that are outlined in our textbook it certainly seems so because they have ticket sales forms and numbered tickets and things like that. And then what happened to the $50 bill? That's the main problem of this case. And then what do Mrs. Bowman and the other volunteers selling the tickets say about it? So what are their accounts of this incident? So the problem is Mrs. Bowman is angry that the PTA will not pay for her daughter's trip to a national cheerleading competition. And then the second part of the problem is there's $50 missing from the total expected ticket sales for the basketball game. In the second category, I'll propose my plan of action. So the first issue I'd like to tackle is the missing money. So the first thing I would do is talk to Mrs. Bowman regarding the missing money and the missing $50 bill. Mrs. Bowman has been a regular volunteer for years, and so as the principal, I would not want to immediately assume that she had done anything inappropriate. I would want to give her a chance and the benefit of the doubt first. So first, I would just ask if she took a $50 bill that night, and if she says, oh my gosh, yes, I did take a $50 bill, but somebody came up and wanted a 50, so I exchanged their money for two 20s or something like that. Something to that effect. This could potentially be really easily explained. I would also ask if the ripped tickets were saved. Did you save the ripped tickets? Did you put them with the rest of the tickets in the lockbox? What happened to those ripped tickets? So just kind of trying to investigate the situation, figure out, is there a really easy explanation for this? And nothing really improper happened, but we just maybe tell Mrs. Bowman, hey, next time, no monetary exchanges from the cash fund. I would also talk to other volunteers present. If I couldn't find out what happened for Mrs. Bowman, I would start asking other volunteers, did you see any ripped tickets? Did you see someone pay with a $50 bill? Maybe not necessarily implicating Mrs. Bowman, but just kind of trying to get to the bottom of the situation. If I couldn't figure out what happened, I would eventually involve local law enforcement. I realize this is a very small sum of money, but you never want the public to ever find out about such an incident that you didn't report, so I would go ahead and report this to local law enforcement. And then finally, if I were to find that Mrs. Bowman was at fault, I would ask her to repay the $50, and then I would not allow her to be in charge or be a part of ticket sales in the future. I don't think this is a case where a school would need to press charges, being that it's only $50. The last part of my plan of action is actually to create future improvements. So I want to create procedures that would prevent the situation from happening again. So there needs to be a staff supervisor at all money intake events. Mr. Stevens is not capable of supervising both concessions and ticket sales, so there needs to be another staff representative from the school to take on this responsibility. All damaged tickets should be placed in the money bag and handed in with the money to the principal. That way, if someone's saying, oh, there was damaged tickets, we see the damaged tickets, and that confirms this. And then finally, I would implement a volunteer training with the principal before events for parent volunteers so that they are familiar with these procedures, and as well as all the other procedures that seem to already be in place, of which there are many at this school, like using number tickets, using the forms for the ticket sellers after the event. All of that seems really great, so just maybe making sure everybody's trained and everything would benefit the school. My plan of action for the PTA issue is to speak to the PTA president about the issue. I do not believe that Mr. Stevens actually has authority in this case. According to our textbook by Mutter and Parker, the principal is only supposed to be serving in advisory roles. So I would excuse myself from the decision in this situation. I would maybe advocate to the PTA president that I believe that's a lot of money to spend on one student, and be an advocate, but I would not have power over this decision. And I think that Mr. Stevens needs to step back, apologize to Mrs. Bowman for overstepping his bounds, and just kind of say, this is not my responsibility. It's the responsibility of the PTA. So resolving the issue. First, as a principal, you always want to do the best for your students. So students in the school should be receiving benefits from of the money from their events. So if money's raised at a basketball game, that should be funneled back into athletic programs for students. Or, some schools do have policies of using athletic funds for other purposes, but no matter what, it should be benefiting students. Students should not have their parents blamed for something without proof. So Mrs. Bowman and her daughter are active members of the school community, and you don't want to come out guns blazing, Mrs. Bowman, how dare you do this? Because one, that reflects poorly on Mrs. Bowman, it reflects poorly on you as an administrator, and also it puts her daughter Lucy in a really uncomfortable situation. Students have a right to privacy in their financial matters. Like I said, this is not something we want to inform the entire school community of. This is not something that we want to become a bigger deal than it needs to be. So I want to respect Lucy Bowman's privacy in this case. And then students also have a right to advocate for trips that benefit them, but all students also have the right to do the same. So while Lucy Bowman definitely has the right to advocate that she should have this trip paid for, every other student in the building has that exact same right. So it's up to the PTA to decide, do they spend that much on Lucy, knowing that that could potentially harm the ability of other students to also receive help from the PTA. In category 4, it will be my debrief and reflection. So first, what I was thinking during working through this case study. First, I was thinking that these issues could have easily been avoided. I feel like that's a common theme with case studies that we do in this program, but if people followed the correct procedures, having a ticket sales supervisor who is a staff member, or Mr. Stevens only serving in an advisory role in the PTA, this whole situation probably could have been avoided. I also was thinking that the issue needs to be quickly resolved. We need to resolve this quickly and as privately as possible, again, to respect the privacy of those involved. And then I'm also thinking about the procedures that I'm going to create in the future that are going to help me avoid this current situation ever happening again. I'm feeling sorry that Lucy Bowman is unable, or that the school is unable to assist Lucy Bowman with the cost of her trip. I, as a principal, I'm sure would love to give $700 for every student to go to a national trip. However, that's not really reasonable. So I'm feeling sorry that I can't help her from my school funds. I'm also sorry that I have to assess the likelihood that a loyal parent volunteer has now stole money from the school. The case study mentioned that Mrs. Bowman is a very regular volunteer and a very involved parent. So I'm sorry that I have to be put in this situation and Mrs. Bowman is put in this situation of me having to investigate her for this. And then I'm also feeling frustrated with myself for not planning better to avoid a problem with these ticket sales. I'm valuing in this case the truth. Above all else, I'm valuing the truth. I want to find out the truth. What happened to that $50 bill? Was it truly just, someone exchanged two 20s and a 10 for a 50, and the tickets really were ripped and nothing really super improper happened, or was there really a theft going on? I want to know the truth. I also value Mrs. Bowman's positive contributions to the school over the years, which is again why I'm saying I want to respect her privacy, why I don't want to automatically accuse her of anything. I want to just get to the bottom of the truth without making any malicious assumptions towards Mrs. Bowman. And then finally, I'm valuing a resolution that satisfies all parties here. I want to satisfy Mrs. Bowman. I want to satisfy the school's need to have their money properly handled. I want to satisfy the PTA's need to help distribute funds. I want everybody in this situation to end up coming out in a win-win-win situation. For unresolved issues, so the PTA, their decision on Lucy Bowman's trip probably would not have been decided yet at the resolution of this case from a principal standpoint. So the PTA would still have to make their own decision on this. Potentially there could still be a mystery regarding this $50 bill. There's no guarantee that the school could solve this case. Maybe Mrs. Bowman admits something, maybe another volunteer saw something, maybe Mr. Stevens can find security cameras that prove something. But overall, there is the potential that this case would not be solved, really. And then also unresolved issues would kind of be going forward towards the future. the new rules and procedures that would be implemented to prevent similar situations from arising in the future. Further reflection. So I feel like I effectively and efficiently managed my school resources in this case. I tried to locate the funds that belong to my students. I think that that's efficiency, is not wasting money. I avoided a conflict over responsibility of decision making in the PTA. Principals should probably try to avoid conflict whenever possible, especially when it comes to conflict with parents and conflict with the community. So by saying, you know, the PTA's money is the PTA's decision, I think I've been effective at avoiding that conflict. And then creating and implementing these new procedures is both effective and efficient because it will increase the likelihood of more positive outcomes in the future. I also, as a principal, obviously want to focus on my students and what I'm reflecting to them and what I'm modeling for them and what I'm helping them to learn. So in this case, the social learning was a lot about modeling from the principal's standpoint. So I modeled respect for others because I'm not accusing Mrs. Bowman. I'm simply trying to get to the bottom of the information. I don't want Mrs. Bowman to feel like she's being attacked or vilified, so I'm going to try my best to just really remain respectful to her. I also demonstrated how to apologize when you're wrong. So I want Mrs. Bowman to know that I'm sorry, I overstepped my bounds on the PTA case. I should apologize, and I think that that's a great thing that we need to model for our students. And then finally, I'm displaying really professional behavior in this case by creating policies that are going to prevent future problems before they even happen. That's the mark of a good professional, is anticipating challenges and overcoming them. So that's another great thing to model for students. So this issue, or this case, excuse me, was less about academic learning, but I also worked to preserve funds that should be used to support student learning, whether that's student learning through sports or student learning through some sort of academic enrichment that athletics helps to fund. This money belongs to students, and so helping them learn with it is my priority. I also did not use the school's academic funding to support a co-curricular activity in the cheerleading trip. So as a principal, you know, obviously I want to help Lucy Bowman out. I want to give her money, but I know that my money is earmarked for other purposes, and so I am preserving that for students' academic learning. I would also attempt to make sure that the issue was not disruptive to the school learning environment by keeping things as private as possible. I want school to go on as normally as possible every day for my students, especially over something as small as $50. Obviously, I want to find that $50, but at the same time, it is not worth a major disruption to my school community. Pretty much the only resource I used in this was our textbook, just to learn more about ticket sales procedures and PTA principal interactions. Thank you so much for watching.